This is the video a lot of you have been asking for, the wildest Severance theories so far, and with Season 3 recently being renewed, praise Kier, I've compiled some of the most compelling, insane, and wild theories out there. Was that actually Helena at the end? And is the entire town of Kier severed? We're going to look at these theories using all the evidence we have to determine if they hold some weight or are complete feculence. I've also left timestamps below so you can see all the theories we'll be covering. Now make sure to like and subscribe, and do check out my season ending explained and hidden details video when you're done. Now let's get into it. What if everyone in Kier is severed, or at least might have been at one point in their lives? First, let's take a look at the town itself. It feels very much cut off from the rest of the world, or severed if you will. It has its own license plates and state abbreviation of PE, and aside from Salt's Neck, we really haven't seen any of the world beyond Kier. In a Reddit AMA, creator Dan Erickson stated he wanted Kier to feel unmoored from time and space, and that bleeds into the town a bit too. We wanted the town to feel like an extension of Lumon in a way. Kier may even be where Lumon dumped early test subjects of the Severance project, and there's no better example of this than Ricken and his friends. These guys are highly intellectual, yet at the same time wildly childlike. For example, there's this scene in episode 101 where Patton questions why World War I wasn't called World War I at the time.
No one would have called it World War I because World War II hadn't happened yet.
Or how about when baby Eleanor is found, he yells that he was the first one to find her, like a kid winning some sort of competition.
I found her! I found your child! I'm the one who found her!
But the strongest piece of evidence is when Rebecca tells Mark in 109 that she has sores on the back of her head.
And I have some sores on the back of my head from my bird. You might see them.
But what if they're the result of several attempts to put chips in her head? Now this part is really gonna blow your minds. You know how every severed employee has their first name followed by last initial, like Mark S or Dylan G? Look at Ricken and his friends. We have Patton, who could be Pat N, Ricken, Rick N, Denise, Danny C, and Rebecca A, or Rebecca. Rebecca's name is especially interesting. I've never met a Rebecca in my life. It's possible when she was severed she was known as Rebecca, but when her brain got scrambled she defaulted to the way Lumon refers to innies, ditched the last letter of her name, and simply goes by Rebecca A.
Rebecca.
Rebecca.
This leads me to my next theory, that Ricken is an early Lumon test subject, or even the Outie of one of the goats found in Mammalian's Nurturable. Let me explain. In the book The UUR, Ricken discusses his childhood and how his parents were arrested for a bank robbery. Not much is known about where he grew up, but he would have had to have been put in some sort of foster care. I think he was picked up by Lumon. What better test subject than an orphan? Plus, we learned that he interned at a honey factory, which might have been run by Lumon. There's lots of bee imagery at Lumon, like the Bee Ever Merry poster in the break room and the beehive code word in the security office. We know Lumon has internships too, such as Miss Huang interning on the severed floor. Ricken also has a special connection with the innies, and perhaps that's because of his severed past or how indoctrinated he is. The innies gravitate to the profound words from his book, which for us normal folks seems ridiculous. But the thing I find most odd are Ricken's connections to goats. And shout out to user PlaneRoom7681 on Reddit, who created a list of connections between Ricken and these goats. These include Ricken's Bell app, which is similar to the bell Lorne uses for the goats. Goat statues surround Ricken's house, and at Ricken's dinner, everyone except Mark and Devin are in earth-toned brown outfits, and check out the sun god imagery of his book cover. It matches the sun blaring behind the goat during the sacrifice scene. Ricken also loves to climb mountains like a goat, oftentimes without any gear. Now I have no idea how this would work, but what if you could take all these severed parts of a person, like the 25 parts of Gemma, and implant them into an animal? So when you do experience moments of trauma, it transfers to, let's say, a goat. Drummond even says of the goat to be offered that it will be, quote, entombed to a cherished woman, who we assume is Gemma. The connection between Ricken, his friends, and goats is further shown when people like Rebecca chew like a goat and, according to Devin, smell weird. The overtime contingency in the season 1 finale may have even triggered something in Ricken as he suddenly gets flustered and starts saying things like hamburger waiter.
They sound like a sad old hamburger waiter.
But if you want to look more into this, I've left the links to PlaneRoom's posts in the description. An often overlooked aspect of the season was the brief clip of a man in the hallway watching Mark as he returns to MDR. At first, I thought this might be a replacement to Mr. Grainer, the former security guy, but IMDb shows a different actor credited as Man in Hallway. This same actor is credited a few episodes later as Shadow Mark, the mysterious Mark lookalike we see during Ortbo. This isn't to be confused with Mark Watcher. That's a different actor. The question then becomes, why include him here? What purpose does he serve? I think we've barely scratched the surface of just how labyrinthine the Lumon hallways are. I mean, just look at the directions in order to get to the export hallway. Then there's PD's map, which has areas we haven't seen yet, like the Coil of Doom. Heck, we didn't even know there was a choreography and merriment department until the season 2 finale. I think this guy's from somewhere on the severed floor we haven't seen yet. He definitely is tied to Mark and might be in charge of physically keeping an eye on him, just like this guy monitors Mark from a computer. One of the most talked about theories, and one I personally believe to be true, is that Helly is pregnant with Mark's child. The two have had sex twice, and I'm guessing there aren't any Lumon condoms lying around. The show has hinted at Mark being a dad with the Fu signage outside Zufu Chinese, which means father, and that cryptic end line by Miss Casey in episode 205 in which she says,
"Your Outie is going to be..."
before it cuts off. I think she was going to say a father. We know that Helena has this infatuation with Mark and even stalks him at the Chinese restaurant, joking that she's going to take him home and introduce him to Dad. But in my opinion, the most compelling evidence to suggest that she's pregnant is how much drama it would create on the show. It's a writer's biggest dream to put a character in such a weird situation where we essentially have two consciousnesses fighting over one child. Like, whose baby would it be? And because Mark has had sex with both Helly and Helena, you can't really tell. Also, Outie Mark never engaged in this sexual behavior with Helly, yet he's always wanted a child. What would happen if he found out his innie has a kid? Does he have any claim to that child? It's technically his sperm, so it's a giant glorious mess of drama that I'm sure the writers would want to sink their teeth into. Speaking of Helly, many have theorized that the Helly who meets Mark at the end of the finale is actually Helena. In an interview, actress Britt Lower, who plays Helly, confirmed that this is not Helena. However, this wouldn't be the first time an actor has lied to keep up the mystery of a show. The evidence to support her being Helena is very thin and open to interpretation. The first thing I'll say is that the Helly who is with Mark as he completes Cold Harbor is Helly. I say this because she talks about Delaware, the same thing she answered on her first day of work as Helly in episode 101. I mean, you could argue Helena watched the security camera footage and remembered it from all those months ago, but that's a stretch. In order for this theory to work then, sometime during Mark's escape, a Glasgow block would have had to have been performed. Maybe Jame initiated it so that his daughter could stop Mark. A lot of proponents of this theory use this shot of Helly looking at Gemma as proof it's Helena. They believe it's kind of haha I won look, which would go against Irv's opinion of Helly.
Helly was never cruel.
So no, I don't think this is Helena at the end, but if you do want to know more about why Mark chose Helly over Gemma, I go over it in much more detail in my Ending Explained. One of my good friends Alyssa said to me way back in 201, what if the board isn't an actual group of people, but is actually a motherboard? And I haven't been able to get this idea out of my head. What if Lumon has found a way to store the consciousnesses of past Lumon CEOs onto some sort of computer where they could live forever and guide the company as the board? The ultimate goal would be to find a way to upload these consciousnesses to new vessels so they could be reborn. Now you might be asking yourself, Think Story, we've heard the board talk before, and that's partially true. In episode 108, when Cobel asks if the board is there, a muffled man's voice says yes.
Yes.
I think this is Jame Egan. He would be the only living person on the board, and considering the conversation in this scene is all about Lumon finding out about Helly's suicide attempt, it makes sense that he would be on this call. In episode 203, Helena tells Cobel that they can go inside and call the board to discuss her employment at Lumon. But I'm like, what board can be assembled at a moment's notice on a weeknight? And what if the board is connected to the Revolving? This is a term we first heard in the season 1 finale when Jame Egan tells Helly that one day she will sit with him at his Revolving. I believe this occurs when the current CEO dies and their consciousness is uploaded to the board. Helena would then take over as Lumon CEO. Of course, the biggest flaw in this theory is that the technology needed to perform such a consciousness transfer wouldn't have been around for the the earlier CEOs. If you've seen my episode 209 video, you'll know the show's connection to an episode of The Twilight Zone in which a woman finds out that she's part of a group of mannequins who all take turns becoming real for a month. The Perpetuity Wing has the entire collection of Lumon CEOs as mannequins. What if they all take turns as some sort of vessel in the real world? One of the more radical theories out there is that Mark is the bastard child of Jame Egan and Miss Cobel. Episode 208 gave us a glimpse of Cobel's childhood, in which she won the Jame Egan Wintertide Fellowship. We also know Jame stole her schematics for Severance, and I can't help but think the two of them would have had to have worked together in order to develop it into something that works. We also know that Jame has a history of fooling around with other women, even those he works with, and that he's sired other children in the shadows. Cobel knows this as she uses this knowledge to get Devon and Mark into the birthing center. Is that just a known Lumon secret, or does she have first-hand knowledge of her former boss's indiscretions? I think Jame got Cobel pregnant when she was underage and she was forced to give up the baby. This baby would be Mark. In fact, it may even be Mark and Devon if they are indeed biological siblings. For this theory to work, Mark wouldn't know he is adopted, as we learned in episode 203 that his mother's name is Fern. And just as an aside, it would be crazy because that would mean Mark and Helly are half-siblings. Mark being Cobel's son might explain her weird infatuation with him in season 1. She keeps an eye on him next door and does motherly things like bake him cookies. She also plays the role of a wet nurse teaching Devon how to breastfeed, so it's possible she had a kid or kids for some time before giving them up. Cobel might have been the first Severance test subject. It makes sense if she's the one who created it that she would put her mind on the line to test it. It might also explain why she exhibits signs of being two different people. There's the loving, nurturing Mrs. Selvig and the cold and calculating Miss Cobel. The greatest example of this is when Miss Cobel tells Mark her mother was an atheist, while Mrs. Selvig says her mother was a devout Catholic. If she was the first to be severed, it probably came with a lot of problems, and her mind might have gotten jumbled. She herself may not even know that Mark is her child, but some sort of motherly instinct draws her to him. We still don't know how Gemma wound up on the testing floor, especially considering she is supposed to be dead. In fact, Mark tells us in 202 that he saw her dead body. If we're to believe the narrative of the show, Gemma's car slid on the ice and she got into an accident. In fact, I think she drowned. This is evidenced by the wet hair in this quick flash of her in 205, the sinking car found in the intro credits, as well as the fact she tells the nurse she'd be more afraid of drowning to death in a mudslide than suffocating. With Lumon being part medical company that's involved in things like collecting blood and even fertility clinics, it isn't a stretch to think that Gemma was saved from this drowning and brought to a hospital run by Lumon. There they could whisk her away, however, this still doesn't explain Mark seeing her dead body. That's the part of this theory I can't wrap my head around. Her ashes, which Mark keeps in his basement, can be explained simply as not being hers, but Mark seeing that body would mean either that was Gemma's real dead body, some sort of cloning took place, or Mark's memory has been manipulated, and all these seem a bit far-fetched. In Season 3, I think we'll see Gemma escape from that Lumon stairwell and hook up with Devon and Cobel, where we'll learn what really happened the night of her so-called death. Perhaps the biggest indicator that Irv will be back in Season 3 is this loose thread of him talking to a mystery person on the payphone. In the past, I theorized it could be someone we know like Ragabi or Cobel, but with how his character ended, I think we're looking at a new character for Season 3. Irv's storyline is the perfect starting point to explore more of the outside world, and specifically the anti-Lumon movement. The person he's talking to is likely someone who is both former Lumon and part of this movement. Remember that Ragabi told Mark there are anti-Lumon groups out there far more powerful than the Whole Mind Collective, the only real anti-Lumon group we've seen thus far. How else would Irv's Outie know about the export's hallway unless someone was feeding him inside information? He tells this mysterious caller he thinks his innie got the message. This message was Irv's attempt to subliminally implant the export hallway in his innie's mind, which was done by painting the export hallway over and over again while drinking coffee and inhibiting sleep, so that his innie would be tired and dream or hallucinate it. But now I turn it over to you. What do you think of these theories, and which ones would you like me to cover next? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, and for more bad takes you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember,
I love you.